I do my best to rattle her just a little bit every show. And whether it's a rhyme or it's something, it's always fun to keep Kale on her toes. Sophie.
And then sometimes Ken says things that he doesn't really know anything about, and then I have to explain to him what pop culture thinks that thing is later on after we get off the live stream, and I really enjoy that because he'll be like, "What? Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's a thing."
I don't do the TikTok, so
Yeah.
I can't quite keep up.
I TikTok till I don't stop.
That's right. We need to talk about 5 tips to get more focused when training your dog outside, especially for those of you who this is your first training station. You think,
I feel sorry for whoever just joined us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Are these guys just going to go on and on about that? Something I wanted to mention because these don't last long, and I saw some notes in our Slack. Puppy tugs. They have been out of stock for a long time, and it is our most popular toy. This is version 1. This isn't even version 2.
Right, because it's got a better braid now, doesn't it?
We have a brand new version of our puppy tug that's available, and it's now available in the U.S. and Canada.
They're so soft.
Oh my gosh, it is the tug toy we're trying to make. Like, it is the thing we wanted all of our dogs to have, and it's something that we're going to talk a little bit about using toys in your training and using interactive toys in your training. So make sure at the end of tonight's show or whatever, or at some point you check out our puppy tugs at McCannDogs.store. They don't last long, and because you guys are here tonight, I want to make sure you're aware of the fact they're back. So, when we're talking about the number one first tip that we need to talk about when it comes to training a dog to be more focused outside, and this is something that I think a lot of people overlook. It's certainly long before I was a student at McCann Dogs and before I became a trainer there. It's something that I didn't even really consider, and it's something I want you to consider now moving forward with your dog. Every time you step outside with them, it adds an extra layer of difficulty to your training. So you need to take some steps, not literally, figuratively, to make sure that you are trying to compensate for that. At least you're aware of it. Let's talk a little bit about why it's more difficult to get the results that you might normally get in another environment.
We had a new session of Life Skills 1 in-person students start last night, and I usually do like a bit of like a theory deep dive talk, and one of the things that I spoke about last night, which works here so well, is the fact that dogs are very situational. And I think a lot of people don't realize that if you want your dog to learn to do something outside, around distractions, reliably, no matter what's happening, you then have to make sure you can also get that same thing in an environment that is not as challenging as perhaps outside. And I think sometimes people don't do enough work and preparation away from the real deal before stepping out to being outdoors and then, being rightfully frustrated, of course, being outside, but at the same time, they really haven't done the amount of work that should have been done in order to go out there and actually be able to put an expectation on your dog that they shouldn't pull and that they should listen when you ask them to leave something alone, or they should come when they're called, or whatever the situation might be. I think sometimes people don't understand that taking your dog outside and having expectations is something you actually have to work towards. And there's, a special set of steps and training things that you need to do before you actually can do that. Now, I'm not saying that we need to keep our dogs indoor all of the time. I'm saying that when we're outside, and we'll talk a little bit about this, we're going to have things a bit more controlled so that our dogs can't rehearse making poor choices until we can, over here be working it so that we actually can have the expectation that we want to have in the long run.
Yeah.
People just get too far ahead too fast, and then they end up getting mad or frustrated, but really, that's, it's very realistic what the dog's doing. It's because they haven't had training and they're being put in a situation where it's too easy to fail.
Well, Laura mentioned everything outside is a distraction.
Oh,
that's
especially when they're
true.
Really young.
Here's maybe the most difficult distraction is the openness. Like, it could be nothing there is the challenge of the distraction, that there's an opportunity to run away, that there's an opportunity to do some self-rewarding behavior like go sniff in the grass. As long as you're thinking about that before you open the door, this is the first step. If you want to be successful when you start your training session, when you're going outside, start with some control.
Yeah.
It's so valuable when we ask our dogs to sit before opening the door and ensuring that we're the ones calling the shots here, so that and it's not about alpha and like, sort of a conversation. What it's about is setting the dog up to be successful and being a great leader, knowing that we need a little bit more reserved brain when I open that door. I can't let my dog go absolutely bonkers and, go flying out the door, drag me down the steps, or, maybe down the hallway, whatever your situation might be. Simply opening the door and having your dog sit in a controlled position, it just changes the next 2 steps. And that is so valuable. Understanding that the outside, that being outdoors is such a great distraction means that you're preemptively going to get some control before you even step out the door. We have a great video. I might have a clip of it somewhere. It's quite a long one, so I don't want to play it tonight. But we have a great video where instructor Carol has a golden, and the golden just can't wait to get outside. And Carol works really hard to get the dog to check in with her, and that's the only time that the door will open. That's when greater opportunity presents itself.
The dog basically decides their own fate by the choices they make.
Yeah, 100%. So think about that. You also should be thinking about the fact that how are you going to manage the dog? Maybe you're going outside and it's an environment that's safe, but you're working on some of those listening skills outside. So what are you doing to manage when your dog makes a mistake? This is exactly where something like a leash, a collar comes in, a long line. This is going to be the greatest tool you can possibly.
Without a long line.
That's right. It's just, you might be able to, but boy, oh boy, are you going to be better,
Slowly.
train it faster. Yeah, exactly. You're gonna train it faster. You're going to be more clear. Your dog's going to be more likely to check in with you early because they quickly realize that illusion of freedom that they have isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So what are you doing before you step out the door? You've got your management tools. You've made a decision. You're going to train these next few steps. That's really, really powerful. It's really important. So from now on, if you're training a dog to listen better when you're going outside, start with a training session. Everyone seems to think, a lot of people seem to think that I don't want to use food forever. Like, sure, I can train my dog using food, but I don't want to be dependent on it. It is really important to understand that everything we do at McCann Dogs and the McCann method is in an effort to reduce the amount of food over time. The more your dog's successful, the less food you have to use because you've done things right. The other thing we talk about a lot is high value food. And this can be a game changer, or it can just be a distraction. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I just want to add to what you just said, though. The McCann method is about teaching dogs to be motivated to listen to you. But the bold part should be motivated and you. And I think sometimes when people hear things like, oh, motivate your dog to work or whatever, they automatically think positive reinforcement, which means they automatically think food. And while McCann Dogs does use quite a bit of food in the early stages of our training, we want to make sure that at the end of the day, it's not the food that is the reason why the dog wants to listen to you. What we want to do is somewhere along the journey of training, because we have great timing, great information, we're really consistent, we need the motivation to go from the food to being you. So that if we take the food away and if we take the leash away and if we take the long line off or whatever the situation might be, we still have a dog that actually wants to listen to you. And this is where relationship comes in, and that's just sort of the big point. But I think sometimes people just assume that they have to use the food to get there, and then other times people will be in a distracting environment like being outside and they say, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Food just doesn't work. I go outside and my dog doesn't want the food. And that's totally normal because your dog is learning that the food is not as motivating or is not as enticing as a distraction. And the worst thing about it is that they're also saying that you are not as motivating or not as enticing as, this leaf or the twig on the ground. And that's where we really have a problem. So food is great, and we want to try to use it to the best of our ability, but we also want to think about how else can we get good listening skills and good reliability from our dogs when we're outside if food doesn't work. And I don't know if that we want to go into that or not, but that's That's sort of the point of this point.
Here's a rule of thumb. If the food's not working, you're going to have to change the location you're in. And there's something that
or change the motivator to something else.
Well, yeah, if there's too much temptation, change the location. There's a lot of people that would say like, oh, it's just not working, or oh, I can't find a spot. And then we talk with students, people who are now accountable. We have a training program where we talk about accountability and making sure that throughout the week we're making you work a little harder and a little bit harder, and based on your dog's success. And the amount of times somebody will say like, oh, it's just I go outside and it's just too busy, and then the other people say like, yeah, I'm in downtown Chicago and I've got to drive 15 minutes out to a park that's quieter so that I can be successful. These are the people that I want you to model yourself after these people, because they're just so intent on being successful that they're willing to work for it.
Don't fall into the percentage of people that don't want to do the hard work. They just want all the easy fixes.
Totally.
And those are the people that just go from this thing to this thing to this thing to this training equipment to that training equipment and this person and that person, this person. Yeah. And by the end of it, the dog's so confused, the person's so confused, you're not going to get success. Yeah. If you have a dog that's easily distractible, you need to be prepared to do the work.
For sure. And
it's that simple.
And you have two choices. You're either going to make excuses why you can't work or you can't do it, or you're going to make changes.
Yeah.
And the people who make changes are the ones who will see success more quickly. And that's who I want you to be. That's what we talk about here in the train station. You can make these little changes and get those wins. High value food is great, but sometimes it's not enough. You need to know that. You need to know that that piece of steak might not get you the success that you're looking for. It's really important.
But you also want to remember that food isn't the only motivator. We had a border collie that, wasn't really that food motivated. And on top of that, are you telling me that we're going to talk about that?
Well, we will talk about that in a little bit.
Never mind.
That's okay. We might as well continue.
Okay. Sorry, it was down the page. This is a natural progression. Anyways.
Yeah.
We had a border collie that wasn't really that food motivated, but on top of it, she was very, very highly stimulated by cars. She really wanted to chase them, and I could go out, I could put a literal stake in front of her face, and she'd be like, "Nope, I'd rather chase that car." But if I had a tug toy with me, well, that was a good competition for the car. I was able to get her attention, play some tug, have her look at the car, have her look back at me, play some tug, and pretty soon she learned if I ignore that car and I look back at her, I'm going to get a reward. So sometimes it's about changing location. Sometimes it's about going further away when you're trying to figure out what the value is, and sometimes it's changing what you're using as your reward. Or maybe you're going outside and you think that your dog likes the treat that you have, but really you have a really boring treat and you need to bring out the big guns so that you can compete against things that your dog is more interested in.
So it doesn't
take them out hungry. There's like a million things you can do.
Yeah, well, let's talk about those things. Train at mealtime.
Yeah, so train when they're already eager to eat.
Absolutely.
Train when they're energetic.
Yep. For sure. Train before they get to the puppy burn moment. If your puppy's having puppy burns or frenetic random activity periods, I think is what how they're referred to.
Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll do the behavior inside the house like 5 or 6, 7 times, reward my dog for it, ask them again, they do it perfectly, I reward them for it, and I do it over and over and over again, and then immediately go outside and ask for it again.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because some dogs, they don't naturally understand, because maybe you didn't make all the right choices when your puppy was first home, and they didn't learn that food is a currency. Food is a valuable thing. Most dogs will naturally take to food, but some need a little bit more encouragement.
Yeah.
So getting a couple of wins inside where it's less distracting, and then taking the show on the road, so to speak, just out where it's a little tougher. Your dog already understands what the reward is. If I do this thing, I get food reward. And outside, taking that skill from inside to outside so quickly is a natural transition.
I think it's really important too that if you have a good idea of like what will happen with your dog. I was literally in a different situation with my own dog this morning, doing some very, very high level agility training. I was going to do a course. I knew there was one section in the course that I really wasn't sure whether he had even seen that type of crazy challenge before. So instead of just throwing him into it, I I went, I did the most challenging part of the sequence.
Yeah.
I rewarded him, I showed him, and he was like, okay, I think I got it. And then I did the whole thing, and then he nailed it on the first try. But I know that if I hadn't gone and showed him and set him up to be success first before throwing him into the whole challenge, there's a 99%, 98% chance that he probably would have failed. So the dog training formula what we're talking about can be used in all kinds of situations. I need to look at the situation and say, how's this going to go? And if I don't think that there's a good percentage of it being successful, I'm going to make some changes to try and put my dog in a situation where there's more wins, and then I'm going to inch my way towards my ultimate goal, and that is being able to have the dog do it in that tougher scenario.
So, we've talked about using food, using toys, but sometimes there are some natural things that you have with you all the time that will help you to be more successful when you're training a distracted dog outside. And I think when people realize the power of motion, as an example, which we'll talk about first, when you realize the power of your motion, it unlocks something for your dog, especially if you have a rather prey-driven dog. There are so many different kinds of dogs out. There's all kinds of different motivators for dogs out there. And oftentimes, so often, motion is a very powerful one. And it will overcome a lot of those tough distractions, but only if you use it the right way. Let's take a look at a video that we shot. This is from a little while ago, but I want to break it down, talking a little bit about using motion, because I think you guys will find it helpful.
Oh, look at that young buck.
Yeah.
Lots of dogs are really motivated by motion. We talked in a recent video about finding a purpose.
I was 11 years old when we shot
What
this.
is happening right now?
Full pace.
Time
If you're
travel?
struggling with your walking on leash training, your dog's constantly pulling on leash, then maybe changing the pace can be an important step in getting some success. Now, walking too quickly is often,
That's
unless
the
you're trying.
that chase cars.
Yeah.
She also liked to chase me.
But this is an important factor. You're gonna have to find the right pace that motivates your dog, because there's a sweet spot in there.
To close your rings or get more steps, not going to be helpful. Your dog may even find that too exciting and start to get stimulated and pull more. Walking too slowly is likely going to allow your dog to get more distracted. But if once you find that pace, like you're late for something or you're going somewhere, you'll probably see your dog lock in a little bit more, allowing you to reinforce that position, allowing you to reinforce that great walking on leash that you really want. But it's not just limited to walking on leash. Skills like response to name, skills like the recall. This is something that we do with all of our puppies in our puppy restraint recalls. We want to activate the dog's chase drive. We want to really make them excited about the process of getting to us, not just the reward at the end. This is about that full motivation. So when you call your dog's name, you back away and you can reward them. When you called come, you run the other direction, you'll be amazed at how motivated your dog gets by the act of chasing after you. I remember a time when I was snowboarding in the mountains in British Columbia, and we were down in the village, and someone's husky had gotten loose, and people are running around all over the village trying to catch this dog. And when the dog came out onto the road I was on, I just made a funny noise and ran away. Well, guess where the husky went? It chased right after me. So take advantage of some of these natural behaviors from your dog, and you're going to start to see that they're choosing you more often because you're exciting. Just the act of chasing after you is a lot of fun for them. Remember, you're competing with all of the other distractions in the environment, so you better be the most interesting thing.
So this is important. We talked a little bit about leash walking specifically, but what would you do? You got a dog that you're taking, is young in training, figuring things out. How do you set the dog up to be successful? What are the first few exercises you might do with them as you enter a more distracting environment, just for attention and focus?
I'm probably going to do a little bit of a combo of a few exercises where the dog is more still and under control. Things like maybe sitting.
First, what equipment do they have?
Well, it depends on the dog.
Okay.
They might just have a regular flat buckle collar on and like a leather leash, so I have good control. I'd probably have a bait bag on so I can get my treats out really easily. Or if I was working on something where I didn't care that the dog was within 6 feet of me, I probably would have a long line on. I've been in some situations where I've been doing some outdoor training with Beeline. When we took her to some outdoor work, she's a dog that sometimes gets a little bit overwhelmed in busy situations, so we used a gentle leader, like a head collar with her, just to sort of help her kind of be calmer and not as stressed out. You also can use it for pulling. So it depends. There's lots of things that I would use for equipment.
Yep.
But in terms of exercises, I like to do a bit of a combo of things that are sort of more mindful for the dog.
Yep.
But then also on the flip side of that, for some dogs, adding some movement. So being able to turn my dog away from the distractions instead of being stuck there also can be really effective as well. One of the exercises that we really love is teaching our dogs to sit in what we call control position. So essentially that's just the dog sitting at our left-hand side, but on a completely loose leash and without force. So once the dog sits at the side and we help them to be there, we put slack in the leash and we train the dog to have their own choice to remain in our side. And that's just a way that the dog can be safe and can be comfortable. We can keep them under control, but sometimes if the distractions around are too much pressure or too busy and that excitement is just too much for the dog to be stuck in that position, being able to turn and move away from my dog can also be in a really effective way to reset and just take the pressure away and move myself farther away from whatever happens to be distracting my dog in the moment.
Lots of Links says, can you explain why you'd use a long line versus a leather leash outside?
Yeah. Well, I usually like to, you don't have to use a leather leash for sure, but the leashes that we use for our like obedience training or our life skills training is 6 feet long, because that's like just a great length for keeping the dog close, but also working some things at a distance. And we just really like leather because it's much more comfortable in our hands. It's durable. They last forever. There's a million reasons why. They're great. So I would use that for situations where I want my dog to stay a little closer to me, when I need my timing to be quick because I can gather up or release the leash as needed. And I'm going to use that in a situation where the leash is going to stay in my hand. So the dog's staying within that 6 foot perimeter around me. The long lines we like to use when we are wanting to work on some more distance training with our dogs, but without sacrificing the dog's ability to be completely free, with no way for us to get them back should they wish to ignore us or take off on us. So long line training is really good for verbal control, perimeter training, recall training, response to name, teaching them to not dig or, chase things in the backyard, anything where you're going to let your dog have a little bit more freedom, but without having complete freedom where you don't have control. So that's why I like a combo of both.
This is where things fall apart for a lot of people.
They just take their dog off leash and hope for the best.
That's right. Yeah. And it's really important that there's that transitional step where your dog feels like they have freedom, but ultimately you can stop them from doing the self-rewarding behavior. All it takes is to chase another dog, chase a deer, do something that you don't want them to do and you have no control.
Yeah.
And for a lot of dogs, that's rewarding enough. I think Mari had mentioned, that for her dog wasn't food, wasn't toys, it was just praise. And, the dog responded really.
Some dogs
there's
like that.
all kinds of things you need to figure out what motivates your dog. And hopefully it isn't something like eye start or stalking another animal or chasing them down, because if they get the chance to do that when you're trying to get them to learn to be focused when you're outside and they're not focusing on you and they find the other thing way more rewarding, you have a lot more training to do. So setting them up so that you're in control so that they can't make that decision, or at least get that reward, is really, really important.
I think another reason why I really like long lines right from the get-go when dogs are young is that if my dog or my puppy doesn't really have a really great, strong understanding of how to not pull on a leash yet, it can be challenging sometimes to keep them on that 6 foot radius. So in some ways, it seems like, okay, the dog's closer, you have more control, but it's easier for a dog to pull on a 6 foot leash than it is to pull on a 20 foot line. So another reason I'll use lines when I have young dogs is because I don't want to wreck my leash respect. I want to give myself some time to train my dogs so that my puppies have a little bit of freedom to go outside and go to the bathroom and play with me and things like that. But the line is just there as like a little bit of an extra security if they get too far away or whatever the situation might be. So the long line process is something that I integrate into my dog's training right from the very beginning. And that just leads to having really great off-leash control. I know our neighbor used to walk by all the time when Five was a puppy, and then she'd always be like, I can't believe he doesn't leave your property. How does he not leave your property? And I was like, because of this long line.
Yeah.
Because he
can't.
did try to leave the property a couple times, just being a curious little puppy, and I just stepped on the line once or twice. He hit the end of it, turned around, and I was cheering and running the other direction, looking like I had a party, and he was like, huh, this property is way more fun than taking off anywhere. I did that a couple times, and he just never tried again. The long line's awesome.
Oh, totally. I'd like to know how old is your dog? You know, how old is the dog that you're training right now? I'd be interested to see if we're dealing with puppy challenges, older dog challenges. You know, are they adolescent dog challenges? Let me know the age of your dog that you're training in the chat. We talked a little bit about motion, but the one tool that we use so often, regardless of what we're training, is our voice. You know, we use our voice for timing. We use our voice to mark the right moment when your dog's made a great choice. We use our voice to mark the wrong moment when your dog's doing something that you don't like, and you need to mark that decision, that moment in time, so that it buys you time to get over there and like do something about it. So using your voice is a very powerful tool. Using your voice to maintain some focus and attention is something that a lot of people struggle with. Probably has to do with like shyness. You know, they don't want to seem like they're a crazy person wandering around talking loudly to their dog. But I'll tell you, the impact of using your voice correctly is so beneficial, especially in busy environments, especially when there's a real challenge coming up for your dog. If you can preemptively get a little bit more attention before that other dog gets to you, you know, maybe you're walking on the same sidewalk, or you can preemptively get your dog's attention before, you know, you see the cat running across the street. This is the moment to use your voice, because you're more likely to be successful if you preemptively use your voice in situations like that than to have to be reactive. You know, because your dog's made a commitment, they're going to leave you, they're going to do that thing. What other situations could you be using your voice in that would be helpful when you're just trying to maintain some control outside?
You just named like all kinds of them.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, you're working with a dog outside. They're super distracted.
Yeah.
When are you going to be using your voice? Like, when would these guys be using their voice to
You're asking me about timing.
Yeah.
Your question delivery was not clear, my dear. I got you now, though.
Okay.
So when it comes to using your voice, you want to try and make sure that you're using it before things have gone too awry. And I think sometimes what happens when people are outdoors is distractions can happen fast, for sure. And before we know it, the dogs are, you know, suckered into that thing, and then they're gone. But, you know, we really want to make sure that we're being proactive with our voice, so that if our dogs are starting to get distracted, we're able to try and redirect them with our voice immediately. But the only way that's going to happen is if we actually say something early. The other thing you need to think about is like your tone of voice as well. I think sometimes people are not animated enough with their dogs, or in some situations it's the opposite. They're not clear enough with their voice. Some people just like sing song to their dog all the time.
Totally.
And then the dogs are like wah, 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 wah. Sometimes you just, not that we need to yell and scream and like sound mean or anything, but sometimes we need to give them like a firm like, hey, leave that, something that actually is going to affect change. And be careful that you're not using your voice in a way that sound like a broken record. Sometimes people think they're doing such a great job by like chattering to their dog, but really they're saying commands multiple times without actually expecting some type of reaction from their dog. You know, they're saying this command, so that doesn't work, so I go on to another one, and you're not really getting any change. So you really just have to make sure that while your voice can be incredibly impactful, you need to make sure that you're using it properly in terms of the tone, and also with your timing, that you're making sure that you're not waiting too long before it's impossible to get them to listen to you.
Okay, two important things. John mentions, well, I have a deaf dog.
Yeah.
This is exactly where you're going to be using more management tools.
Yeah.
You're going to be using...
We have a deaf dog as well,
Yeah.
because of old age. But yeah, it's a totally different experience with a dog when they can't hear you.
Yeah.
You know, I struggle with it all the time because he did hear for the first 13 years of his life, but now he can't hear at all, and so it can be challenging to have off-leash verbal control, because if you have a dog that doesn't regularly check in, or if they get distracted, they start wandering away and they can't hear you to call them, that can be really challenging. So with a deaf dog, there is some different training that you need to do to teach them to check in often with you. It's a little more complicated than what I would have time to talk about now. These are things that we do in our programs. But a long line, I think, would be immensely helpful for you, John, because you could give your dog a little bit of freedom and then teach your dog to respond to just a gentle tug on the end of the leash, for example. And then you can start integrating, some hand signals to get your dog to listen. Yeah. But yeah, voice is great, but just like with anything in dog training, there isn't just one thing. There's many things, and lots of dogs are different, and you have to kind of figure out what connects best with your dog.
You touched on it briefly, but because there's many things that can affect change with each individual dog, because every dog's a little bit different. And if you feel like you're struggling, we do have an opportunity to train with us in our online training programs. If your dog's over 4 months, be it our life skills program. If you're under 4 months, it's our puppy essentials program. So if you feel like, geez, I hear all this, I try these things, they're just not working for me, you might be the right student for us.
Or you want to know whether you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Or
because a little thing could make such a huge
what should
difference.
you be working on, and when?
Totally.
When are you ready to go on to the next thing?
Yeah.
Sometimes people are staying at a progression too long. Sometimes they've skipped a bunch, and that's why it's not working, because you missed some really important foundational steps. So that's the value of being in a class with instructors, because we're able to guide you through what you're doing. And if we need to send you into a different direction, it's easy to do that because we know what's happening exactly in your particular dog's journey.
Well, and we talked a little bit earlier about accountability. It's a big difference when there's a weekly expectation to be successful.
Also, our instructors are awesome.
Yes, that's for sure. Patricia made a comment. My tone of voice is not that positive at the end of the day.
Okay.
And I get that. So let's talk about some training plans. Because, that's, I guess, the question. But the end of the day is really important. Choosing when to train your dog is really important. At the end of the day might be the worst time that you could possibly do the training, because you're tired from your day at work, or you're tired from your day doing whatever, and now you've got to train your dog. It's not going to be positive for either of you, and your dog's going to sense that pretty quickly.
Or I interpreted that a different way. Like, if your voice is not positive by the end of the day, is it because too much of your day has been made up of telling the dog that they're wrong, that they're, not doing the right things? And perhaps is that the dog's fault, or is that maybe something that you could do differently in order to structure your dog's day so that they can't be making so many poor choices? Maybe they have less off-leash time. Maybe they have less freedom in the house, and we're controlling environments a little bit more. Maybe we're not allowing the dogs to rehearse those bad behaviors by, making their world a little smaller for a little while until we can get some more training underneath our belt. Again, this is another thing I spoke to about with our life skills students last night, is that, your day should not be full of saying, hey, leave that, hey, no, all day long. Your dog's just going to basically get used to you barking orders at them all the time with absolutely no follow-through whatsoever, and you're going to be frustrated, because that's not a fun way to interact with your dog. So sometimes you need to learn all of the many tools that we need to do in this particular stage of life with dogs, where we have to make some pretty different changes or different decisions on how our dog's day is structured to allow more great things to happen. So you're actually saying, good dog, great choice. Oh my God, what a great choice. That's so great. That is what your day should mostly be made of. Should your dog make mistakes? Yep, absolutely. Will they? Absolutely, and that's okay. But it shouldn't be 50-50. It should be like 90-10, 80-20, 80-90 being things are going well, not the opposite.
Right. This is no different than ending your training session. Like the energy that's left in the training session, the amount of people that we see that will train the dog until the dog doesn't care anymore, or they'll just put this block of training and they'll think like, okay, I have a busy day, so I'm just going to train from 7 till 8 tonight after work, because I think, or after dinner, because I'll have that much time. And by the end of the training session, the dog just doesn't have any gumption left to continue with the training. This is especially important when we're talking about getting focus outside. You need to end on a high, on a real win with your dog, whether this is like engaging with toys or having a motivated dog doing like restrained recalls or something like that. You won't believe the value of this, of ending on a note where your dog is still excited to play.
Yeah.
Like they're still excited. Maybe that's the opportunity to go on a walk. Maybe that's the opportunity to do something else. But like end on a real high with your dog, and you'll start to notice that transfers over to the next training training session.
Yeah. And then also too, like as you start to train more, you'll start to notice, what's the length of time that your dog will focus for, because every dog has different attention spans, and an attention span is something that can be improved over time with more training and more engagement. But you need to know that. So if your dog usually checks out after 15 minutes of training, well, you probably should stop at 10 or whatever the situation might be. Keep it keep it so that you're ending on a good note. And for a lot of dogs, they actually do a lot better with being trained for short periods of time many times throughout the day. You don't have to set aside an hour or whatever you think it might be to train your dog, and then for the rest of the day you don't have any rules for them. It's actually better to integrate your training and your expectations into the things that you're already doing with your dog, when you're feeding, when you're hanging out in the kitchen in the morning, when you're taking them out for a potty break, whatever the situation might be. That's where you're going to start showing your dog, this is what I want you to do in this situation. This is how I want you to go through doors. This is how I want you to come back to me when I call you. This is how I want you to lie down on the bed while I'm, making breakfast in the morning. Whatever the situation might be. That's really what you want to think about. So think about length of time of your training session, quit while you're ahead. And number 2, break up your training session so that it's multiple times a day for short periods of time. You're going to get way more bang for your buck in terms of your dog's interest level and success rate.
I would say the most common time for people to sort of overexert their dogs doing something like playing fetch. The amount of people you see
they're like, oh, they never get tired. They never get tired. Well, you're just building their endurance.
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, that's actually a really important factor.
People do that.
You might.
My dog never tires out.
Right.
It's probably because they've done something to create that, or
Absolutely.
they're overdoing it with the dog, and they're actually not reading the signs that, in fact, the dog is actually physically tired, but not mentally tired, or opposite.
That's a huge factor for sure. You end up with these dogs that have great endurance, but they're still poorly behaved.
Totally.
Because you're not insisting on some of the more stationary skills.
Some dogs actually have to teach them to be chill.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about using a toy in training and how you can find it valuable, especially when you're working on focus outside. So I've just loaded up a video. Check this out.
Don't be afraid to switch up your rewards, and toys can be a great way to do that. Our young dog Euchre, who you've seen on the channel.
And this is the dog Kale was talking about, where you could have, cooked hamburger, like something that a dog would love. She couldn't care less.
From the day we brought her home. She's a dog that's not super motivated by food, but when we introduce toys into our training for specific exercises, it's like we entirely change the game for her. Another thing for you to keep in mind is that sometimes having altering rewards. So maybe you work on your recall and the one time it's food, you reward your dog in a control position with food. The next time you pop out the toy at the end, they're never really sure what that reward's going to be. We talk about motivation, and a great way to do that is to get them excited about what that ending's going to be. It's like a jackpot reward sometimes. The other thing that's really nice about using toys, especially when we're talking about interactive toys, is that the benefit of that toy, the excitement of that toy only happens with you. So something like our McCann dogs Fuzzy Tugs or our McCann dogs Puppy Tugs is a great way to engage the dog, and the only time it's available to them is with you. You'll find, and we definitely saw this with Euchre, but you'll find the dog's excitement level goes through the roof, which means that for certain exercises it's appropriate, for others you might want to avoid it. So when you're working your response to name, when you're working your recall, any of these exercises or skills where you want to really crank up the speed, really crank up the drive, pull out your toy. It is a great way to reinforce for your dog that you are lots of fun.
Yeah. So what does your training experience look like? How does your dog behave, engage with you when you are absolutely the most magnetic thing out there? Because really you're competing against some of these distractions. It's just that level of interest. What if you're the guaranteed, surefire, fun thing in these environments where you're not sure, where you're not sure what the response is going to be? If you have a great food reward, if you're using motion, if you're using a tug toy, Believe me, an interactive toy will change your training, especially when it comes to focus outside. Because from a distance, you can bring your dog back in and engage with them. Have that great tug. And, you know, the one thing, I think we have a video on this. I can't quite remember. I'm pretty sure we do. But we talk a little bit about switching it up. So the dog might come in for a recall. And one time we're going to ask them to sit in a beautiful controlled sit in front. Really clear, very controlled. And the next time, dog comes flying in, we throw a ball between our legs. The dog runs right through. The next time,
it's an old one from our advanced
it sounds
class.
quite old, yeah. The next time we have a big game of tug, it's keeping it interesting for your dog, because I know you might think that your dog just loves you to death, and the only reason that they're leaving you is because they're just frustrated that they haven't been outside, or whatever
They just
excuse.
want to go play.
Yeah, or whatever thing you might think. Believe me, that's not the case. They just see the opportunity. They're real opportunists. They see the opportunity to try to get that squirrel, or eat sniff the whatever, the mushrooms on the ground, whatever the thing might be. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why your dog might be leaving you for. It's a reality, right?
It is
like
reality.
You're out and you're hiking or something. A million things.
Those mushrooms get you every time.
Yeah, we used to on the far side of the the far side of the training facility, there was some old trees, and I remember Deegan. It was really a struggle to keep her, because mushrooms will grow out of the old roots of like a dead tree. There were always mushrooms growing, and she'd really be distracted by it. So it was a great place to train. It was a great place to work on
Terrible
them.
tasting vegetables.
I know.
Wait, they're not a vegetable,
I
are they?
know.
Are they? What are they?
I don't really know. No, the fungus.
A fungus,
Yeah.
right? Fungi.
Yeah. I saw an interesting question, and I think we've answered this a few times, but I wanted to answer Joanne's question. Why should you walk on the left? Why train with your dog on the left-hand side?
I mean, you don't have to walk on your left, but it's sort of like a dog training tradition, really. It stems way back when soldiers would walk their dogs on the left because their gun would be on the right. That's sort of where it came from way back in the day, but it's also just like an obedience thing. But you don't have to do that. I like walking my dog on the left because it helps them to be on the inside of the road. So if I'm walking them down the road, they're not like in between the car, I'm between the car, they're on the outside. But really, it doesn't matter. You just need to, you yourself need to pick an expectation of where they're going to walk, and you need to stick to it. We have several styles, 2 styles of walking, I guess 3 styles of walking that we use with our own dog. One is where we have a more controlled style of walking. So when we ask our dogs to get in, and we use the word let's go for this, they have to walk really close to our left-hand side. They have to check in from time to time, and they need to be in a completely loose leash, and they have to just walk right by distractions and not pay attention to them. They need to be really focused and attentive. But that is not how I'm going to trail walk my dog. That's not how I'm going to take them out to go for a potty in the front yard. That's not how I'm going to go out and play with my dog. My dog also needs to be able to be free on the leash and not pull, and that's where our leash respect comes into play. And when we use leash respect and we're walking our dog, we actually don't care where our dogs walk. They can be in front, they can be on the left, they can be behind. We just have one hard rule. That is, you don't pull. So if you're ahead of me, that's fine, but there should be slack in the leash. You could be on my right, slack in the leash. Left, slack on the leash. If I'm walking one dog and I'm walking all 4 dogs, my 4 dogs can't walk all at my left-hand side. I let them all walk in front of me. Their leashes are loose. So it really comes down to like expectation, not really side specific, but to make a long story short, it's tradition.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
Yeah.
And as long as you're consistent. So Mari, one of our Heart Dog supporters, and I could see this happening. You're out at the park, you're out in a new challenging environment, you're trying to get your dog to focus more outside, and somebody wants to come up. And, it's so frustrating, and I totally can appreciate that. Mari says, the hardest time with my puppy is not about her, but about the other people that come by. People around here like to really ignore my dog is in training. Please don't, when they use the super squeaky voice. So let's talk about what you need to do when it comes to encountering people when you're working your butt off and trying to get more focus outside.
Yeah, I think that's annoying for sure, especially if you've said you've communicated with them like, hey, my dog's in training, and then they still, make life difficult for you and your puppy. I know that can be really challenging. You just need to have a few exit strategies, and I would just turn and move away from that person and say, thanks, but no thanks. See you later. I'm going to walk over here now. I try to just like suss out the situation that I'm in with my dogs as well. I just try to read the room or the forest or wherever I happen to be and decide whether I'm like, that doesn't really look like it's going to be a really helpful situation for me and my dog. So I'm just going to hightail it out of there. And I'm pretty specific about where I take young dogs, time of day, the amount of people that are going to be around. You're not going to see me walking in a lot of public places with my dogs because my dogs are well trained and they're well socialized, but they do not love when random dogs like run up and get in their face. That's like very upsetting to them. So you just have to kind of pick your situations as wisely as you can to your ability. But I do resonate with your frustration.
Well, another strategy we've used is saying like, hey, my dog's in training. You could really.
She's saying that she does that and they don't listen though. She says my dog is training. Please don't, and they just keep doing it.
Please don't. You say, can you help me? Like,
yeah, you could
can
say
I get you to help me?
For
So
sure.
like we actually have a video talking specifically about that, and I think people really appreciated that approach.
Yeah.
Because it's not as awkward. I know Kayla and I, might tell people to go pound salt. But for you, it might be really uncomfortable to, have these social encounters with people and, your dog. What would we do in a situation like that? Because it can actually be a really useful tool.
Yeah.
And it might be a family member.
Yeah, some people will play along in that situation for sure. So you're either going to have them join you or you're going to deke. You need to get out of there. Yeah. Those are really your only two options. There's really, you don't want to just sort of stay in the situation and let your poor puppy be taunted by the people who are making your life really challenging.
Yeah.
So they either need to join you or you need to skedaddly do right out of there.
If you have a dog who's a little bit unsettled when you're working on crate training, maybe you leave for the day and they're left at your home alone. We found that music can be hugely impactful, right? With Beeline, especially. One of our dogs is super sensitive to sounds, noise. When we were traveling, we're always looking for
storms.
Totally. Music made a massive difference. So what we did is we worked with some digital music producers and came up with music for dogs that has all the features that you want to fill your space with sound.
I want to make a Beeline playlist on our channel.
We could. We'll have to just work maybe a little bit more.
All of her favorite songs.
Beeline's favorite tunes.
Yeah, Beeline's playlist.
So if you have a dog like that, you're working on crate training, you're trying to get your dog to settle a little bit more so that they're less anxious when you're leaving. Check out McCann Dogs Music at the end of tonight's video. You'll be asked if you want to head on over to the McCann Dogs Music YouTube channel, but it's also available on Spotify and Apple Play. I think we're getting an incredible amount of people who are using it now, and we're starting to get some really great feedback.
That's
from people.
great.
So when you're using it,
I love it.
Tag us on like Instagram or Facebook.
I usually put it on when I'm doing my lesson plans.
Totally, yeah.
It's very
Just
relaxing.
try not to fall asleep.
I know.
When it happens.
Yeah.
Also, if you're looking for more training, for more advice, you can join us in our Life Skills or Puppy Essentials online training programs, weekly coaching calls. We get to work with you, send us videos, call our office. It's really I'd say the best supported dog training experience you could have if you're not actually in our training facility. So
if you are close to our training facility, though, come and check it out. We let, if you're brand new, you want to see what our facility looks like, if you want to watch our classes, if you want to see what our instructors' vibes are, if you want to, see what we do, we are open to spectators coming in and checking out our classes and meeting our instructors and seeing what we do. If your dog likes swimming, come and use our pool while it's still open. It's so hot and it's the perfect way to have the best time with your dogs.
We started off the show
You're
wondering...
gonna have to fight me on the weekends for it though, because it's like my new pastime.
That's right.
I love it.
We started off the show wondering what the leaderboard was going to look like in our chat tonight. Dan, lots of links, Luton taking the #1 spot. Laura Gudger taking #2, and Mari number 3. Thank you guys for all of the conversations tonight. New puppy tugs available in the US and Canada. Grab yours before they are gone. But maybe most importantly, with all of the teaching, all of the training, all of the things we've talked about tonight, the rest, my friends, well, that's up to you.